morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to the Life Midwest podcast. The only show that has started out as something socially scientific, then became a show about nothing, and now here we are trying to do a hybrid of both. Yeah, we're not here to figure that out. I'm Kevin Palmer, and that's Wes Shirley.
Howdy, howdy.
Wes has never been a cowboy, but man, he loves saying howdy.
You don't know I haven't been a cowboy. You don't know me.
I've known you for over half your life. I've never seen a pair of boots or any sort of hat that suggests that you are, good sir.
I have udders. Does that count?
Really?
Yeah, little known fact. I'm a real cowboy with udders.
That's our show, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. You know, I didn't actually get that at first. So 2% vitamin D. What are you rocking?
Oh, we're rocking the vitamin D.
You just walk in, vitamin D hanging. Is that...
Now that's our show. Good day, everyone.
See what I mean, though? Now we're on this hybrid of like conjecture about scientific things, but we're not like saying, hey, this is the way life is, but we feel really strongly about it. I don't know. What do you think, buddy?
I would probably say conjecture on this episode.
Are we doing? Yeah, we're doing pretty good on that. Okay. Yeah, today's episode is going to be pretty heavily on conjecture. We're going to talk about the difference between multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes. What's the difference? Doesn't matter. Some of these things we're going to talk about today may have a direct impact on those in the audience. Maybe some of you are a part of an MLM. Maybe you're a part of one and you don't know that it's technically classified as an MLM. We're not here to identify or call anybody out, but while we do try to stay as factual as possible, we also try to make it incredibly obvious when we are just giving conjecture. Hence the talk and discussion of conjecture. Right, Wes?
Right.
Now you're sounding like a real cowboy. Right. Hey, before we get into this, I just wanted to share something with you. So Father's Day was this past weekend, right? And I saw this card as I was like sifting through in the Father's Day card section, looking for my dad and for Ashley's dad. And there was one that I picked up where it was two, I will assume, Southern folk on the card. And one guy was saying, that's a nice car. And the other guy goes, yep, sure is a nice car. And then you open it up and it says, do you think this is how the term NASCAR was invented? I don't know. I just thought it was really, I just thought it was funny.
Is it because every time the car goes around the track, one of them says, that's a nice car.
That's a nice car. All right, on to the discussion at hand today. Some people may have this misconception of that an MLM or multi-level marketing is the same thing as a pyramid scheme, and it's not. While a pyramid scheme is a business designed to only be successful for those who like recruit other people into also being a part of that company, an MLM may have elements of a pyramid scheme, but it technically isn't. And there can be any number of reasons for it. So whether that's consultants offer a legitimate product or service that everyone has access to at the same price, which we'll also get into, companies that charge different prices based on the number of people under you. That, however, that is a pyramid scheme. And we're going to dive more into this, but I just wanted to give that kind of overhead of like differences in definition between the two. So a lot of people don't know this, but an MLM or multi-level marketing, again, has been around since the 30s. Did you know that, Wes? 1930s, late 20s, actually.
Was it Kirby?
No, but the first two that were really like very well known. You may not be familiar with their original name, but California Vitamin Company. Mm-hmm. They are now called Neutralite.
Yeah.
And you also have the California Perfume Company. Does that sound familiar?
I've heard of the Acme Perfume Company.
What if I told you that the California Perfume Company later became Avon?
Ooh, now I'm aware.
So now you're familiar. So my mom personally, this is kind of like my first experience with an MLM as a child. Like growing up was my mom had an Avon lady. And I don't know if that's what like everybody called them like in the 90s, like growing up, or if consultants was a thing or what they were called. But my mom was always like, yeah, my Avon lady or the Avon lady is coming over. Did your mom have one of those or any sort of MLM experiences as a child that maybe you didn't know it was an MLM, but looking back on it, you're like, oh.
My mom at any time while I was growing up was either an Avon lady or had an Avon lady, just on and off as she saw fit. Like she got the itch to make some extra money. She was the Avon lady if she just couldn't be messed with at that time. She had an Avon lady. So I'm kind of familiar with like the concept from within, just like even as like a child, because she was always kind of around it.
I actually didn't know that your mom did Avon, like as a seller at one point. But that can be a good reason to sign up for one of these MLMs is to make some extra side money. Maybe you're not trying to make a career out of it. Some people do, and we'll get into that too today. But I think there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, I can make some extra money off of it, or hey, I use this product anyways, and I can get a percentage off for myself. What's the big deal? That's cool though that your mom did that, because that actually might play into you having some experiences to tie into this today. So, question for you about that, Wes. Did your mom refer to herself as a consultant, or what was she, or did you know that?
I don't think I knew that at the time. She probably used the company's terminology, so she was probably a consultant or an Avon representative or something that sounds nice.
I'm going to venture to guess that they probably use the term representative, but I've definitely noticed over the years how it's changed, and it is more so now they dress up the title. You notice that, like, everybody's a consultant or a specialist. How like you walk into Best Buy and nobody's like an associate or like a worker. They're all specialists. They could literally be their first fucking day and they're a specialist.
Which is ironic, because when you work a job like retail, you're a generalist, right? Like, you're not specialized in any type of...
Right. The guy who works 20 hours a week in the electronics department at Target is not necessarily an electronics specialist. So big sarcastic thanks to Apple for that, by the way.
Is that what Genius is?
So it's more so that was the first place where I ever really noticed that entry-level associates were called specialists. Now, as someone who works for Apple, I will say that the people who work at Apple go through enough training to be called specialists. But there are people, and I'm not trying to shit on Best Buy, but I'm just saying, you go in there and you go to the computer department and you talk to the wrong person who has a name tag that says specialist on it, and you ask them, what is the difference between 8 gigs and 16 gigs of RAM? They have to Google what RAM is. That's all I'm trying to say. So I think we dress it up because we wanted to seem fancier. We wanted to seem lucrative. We wanted to.
You can trust our salesmen. I mean consultants.
Exactly. And so I think too it sounds less sales oriented when you call someone a consultant. And I think it sounds more personal. And I think people realize that. I think there's a lot of people with really well-deserved marketing degrees who sat at a table and said, you know what, Jeeves? I think we should call these representatives specialists. Well, they don't have their esthetician license. Who cares? They'll figure it out. We'll just tell them that they're running their own business. Now, listen, I know it's starting to sound like I'm saying that all MLMs are a scam. It's not what we're here for. Just playing a little bit of devil's advocate.
Can I be here for that? I don't know. I'm interested to hear what all rest you have to say about it, but quite cynical about it all.
Really? Tell me more.
I've known a lot of people who have participated in MLMs, and they've almost never come up like benefiting from it. It's always... And not always, like, there's obviously people in Mary Kay who drive the Cadillac, right? Like, you can see results of people benefiting from it in some shape or form.
Right. Like, I think there's a reason why when you talk about people, like when Ashley talks to people about getting her first Mary Kay car, 99.9% of the time the immediate response is, oh, you're getting the pink Cadillac. So I think there is an assumption there that you know, that there is something lucrative involved. But anyways, continue.
I've just never had a good experience with them. I think in concept they could work out pretty well, but the longer it takes you to get on that MLM train, the harder it is and the least likely it is that you'll succeed unless you're just kind of, you know, like a shark, I guess. Like you'll go out there and make any sale happen and it's like your full-time job. But as a side gig, I think it's generally just more time spent and you can get stuck in some really like dangerous financial situations as you have to front all the costs for your business up front in order to sell their products. It's almost like being a drug dealer.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that too. I'm curious, what can you kind of expand on a little bit more about if it takes you a long time to jump on the train, what you mean by that?
So MLMs, and I think they're the same as pyramid schemes, because if we look at it, there's less people at the top. Like it's shaped like a pyramid, and that's why they're named that. So we have the first person at the top. Maybe it's a group of people. They thought of the ideal. They got some capital together, white labeled some product, and said, we're going to sell this under a luxury brand, and we're going to get people to go out and do our work for us, and we're going to make a lot of money. And then they sell, hey, we just did this to you. You can do that to other people. And then those people sell, hey, we just did this to you. You can do this to other people. And then it gets fatter at the bottom. And then you're at the bottom where, like, who are the people who would join multi-level marketing organizations or as a contractor for one? Basically, they need money. They might be desperate. They might have financial responsibilities above what they're able to control, and they're just looking for some extra money. When you're at those levels and you don't have the type of community or network that you're going to be able to benefit from immediately, you're just kind of stuck pestering all your friends to buy from you. And then people feel obligated because they're your friend. And then maybe they want to get involved in it because they're like, oh, they must be making money. And then now they're doing the same stuff, just pestering your friends. Like there's a couple subreddits that I subscribe to about multi-level marketing and just like a lot of people and their experiences. You get different perspectives on it all. And the general consensus, as far as what I've viewed in this world, is just they are pyramid schemes and it's very negative. Like if you say you're selling, I guess the makeup ones aren't as frowned upon. Like Mary Kay, I know more than 10 people probably who are involved in Mary Kay and they do okay. What irks me the most about it all is the secret is they're all just white label products that someone puts their luxury label on. You're not getting a premium product. In fact, generally, like anything that spends a lot on their marketing spends less on what goes into the product, unless you are like a super premium product. So like if, let's think Mary Kay, but for like the richer than rich, like you go around with like diamond encrusted like bottles of perfume and say, I'll sell you this one of a kind. Like all the rest are just like mass produced, a white label, slap your name on this. It's made in a factory in China.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate and to natively agree with you here when I say this, but I think it's a very perfect storm because you have these people who start a company and they go, I don't want to invest in a storefront. I don't want to invest in labor. I don't want to invest in having to provide benefits like a 401k, health insurance. How can I make a product and distribute it? What if I offer that product at half off to people and then tell them that they should sell it at this price? And now those people are going forward and they're doing all of my marketing and they're doing all of my word of mouth and they are my storefront. And they can invite other people to start their own business, but it's really my business. I think you take that half of it, right? And then you also, I think MLMs really are more popular than ever. Not only do you have so many of them, but I think it's just something that's very popular with our current generation. I think people, it's not even necessarily about like the get rich quick scheme kind of thing that you always used to hear about. I think it's more about people wanting to be their own boss and having flexibility and being able to work when they want to work and choosing how much they want to put into work. And kind of feeling like they have ownership of, like, that's not your product, right? Like to your point, Wes, like that's not your product. That's someone else's product and you're selling it. You're selling someone else's vision. You might believe in it. You might believe in the product. You might use the product, but it's not yours. It's not your child that you created. You know what I mean? It's someone else's. So I'm not saying that you're like a business stepmom or stepdad. If you're out there listening to this, like, don't get pissed at me. I'm just saying I think it's a perfect storm for both sides to where we have this blow up of all of these different multi-level marketing businesses. I think the older companies, the more established MLMs, I think I'm less skeptical of. The Mary Kays and the Avons of the world, but these newer ones that are coming up and popping up out of nowhere, I think that's where I agree with you, Wes. Is I think they're seeing the pioneers, like Mary Kay and Avon, and they're like, I want to do that too. So
it's a good get rich scheme if you have the capital to invest in white label and start a MLM program out of it. The sky's the limit. You're going to be loaded. And the first few people you get on, if you can like really indoctrinate them to believe in your product, it's gonna fly away. Like you and I should create an MLM. We just pull some money together, white label, $10,000 worth of merchandise, and then distribute it to like 5 of our closest friends. We'll make a lot of money off them people. Our friends.
NASCAR. But yeah, it can be, to your point though, too, it can be a really dangerous and slippery slope, because I think when you tell people, hey, you can take this as far as you want to, you can work on your own schedule. I think there are people who are like, yeah, I can just work whenever I want. But I think there are other people who are like, man, I could put 24/7, I could put everything I have into this. And they have that, like, they see red, and they just become blind to like everything else. And they're just, they just run into a business without any idea of how to run a business and just sink. And I think that's a pretty common story. Unfortunately, I think, depending on which MLM they fall into, and they think the only way to get out of it is to invest more money. So, and to give you a more real example, I'm inventing and coining the phrase micro investments. When I say the word micro investments, does that sound self-explanatory to you, Wes, at all?
Yeah, I think it's any investment you put into anything. So like, if you have to turn your attention for even a split second to your business, that's a micro investment in the business.
Yeah. I mean, and that's essentially how I'm looking at it. I sit here and I'm like, you have to spend money on supplies. You're talking office supplies. You have a desk. You probably have a computer. You probably have a printer. You probably have a scanner. You need this. You need that. You make all these micro investments, and you may not look at them as micro investments. You might go, I need these anyways for my day-to-day life. I use a scanner a couple of times a year. May as well make the investment and have one, right? Printer for those couple times a year I print, I ship things on eBay. What if I just had one of those for my product? But you're still paying for shipping, right? You're paying for shipping. You're either paying with time, or you're paying someone else to spend their time helping you, whether that's organizing or labeling product or keeping track of sales or keeping track of inventory, right? Because eventually, if this takes off, you're not going to be able to do it on your own unless you're doing it 24/7. So that's another part of it too. But yeah, micro investments. I felt really smart when I wrote that down. But it's essentially, all these little investments, all these little takeaways and things that you have to put into a business that is not the product. That's a good way to put it. Anything that's not the product, that is time or money spent dealing with or distributing the product. Here's another one, Wes. What about deliveries, right? You sell that product. How are you going to get it to them? You're either going to ship it or you're going to spend time driving it to them. Yeah. So just a thought. Just because I have some experience with it, I do want to talk a little bit about Lularoe, because it's a very interesting concept. While I can't call it a pyramid scheme, it definitely is a completely different type of MLM. So I helped my ex get started with her Lularoe business. Some people probably know this, but it was about $5,000 to get started. Yeah. That $5,000 was strictly inventory. It was not a desk. It was not a computer. It was not a printer. It wasn't pens, it wasn't paper, it wasn't any office supplies that you would typically use to manage a business. It wasn't racks to hold or organize the clothes. It wasn't even labels. It wasn't even, when you go into department stores, Wes, and they have those little sizers, that small, medium, large, you don't even get those. You don't even get the hangers to hang the fucking product on. All you get is boxes with the product. Now, granted, there's two ways to look at this. You can look at it the way that I just looked at it, and you're like, my God, that sounds awful. Or you can look at that and go, you know what? It's $5,000. I might have to invest about $500 in some office supplies. Maybe I already have a computer and a desk lying around. I can turn around and I'm going to sell this all for $10,000. And great. Okay, you made $4,500. But here's the problems. Here's some of the bullet point problems with Lularoe. And I'm not saying this is the problem with every MLM, but because I'm not going to talk out of my ass and pretend that I don't know something, but I am going to tell you about Lularoe because I experienced it first and secondhand. There's no competition because the way Lularoe works, Wes, did you know that with Lularoe every print is like unique?
I didn't.
Yeah. So they have all these products and they have all these clothes and these designs and patterns, and you don't pick what you get. It's not like American Eagle where you're like, hey, do you have that summer blue plaid button up, the single breast pocket for men's and a medium? You don't get that. It's here's the style. What size are you? Here are the prints, the patterns that I have. And so what's supposed to be lucrative about Lularoe as a consumer, as a buyer, is that they're unique. They're only going to make 500 of that shirt. And the odds of you having the same shirt as somebody else is slim. So it's unique. And so that's kind of the driver of this, right? So there's no competition, which encourages other people to start investing in and start their own Lularoe business. Because you might go to Sarah and Sarah might have 5 patterns, and then you'll go to Brandy and Brandy will have 5 completely different patterns. So there's no competition. So that invites saturation. I know we haven't really talked about this on the show, Wes, but did you know that Subway is the most overly saturated, even more than McDonald's, the most overly saturated franchise in the country?
I've heard that.
Because it's so much cheaper to start the franchise over another company. And so, at one point in the small town of Rossford, which for our worldwide listeners is a town of 6,000 people, at what point we had 3 fucking Subways in Rossford. You remember that, Wes?
I remember there was the one across from the school.
Yep.
There was the one out on Buck. Did those exist at the same time?
They did.
And the third one was on Crossroads, I would assume. Oh, yes. Yeah, that BP there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and then if you went into the neighboring town of Perrysburg, there were another 2. So within 15 minutes, you had 5 Subways.
And 2 McDonald's only somehow.
That's a lot, even if you're in like a dense metropolitan area like New York City. I think 5 Subways within 15 minutes is a lot. And so that's kind of what was happening with Lularoe. But, at a point, it has to have this equilibrium where, sure, you can have a bunch of different quote unquote consultants who all have these unique and different patterns. But the problem is that once you have all these people, now there's no incentive for loyalty to consultants or the company. And I say that because if they don't have the pattern that somebody likes, if Sarah doesn't have what I'm looking for, then I'm going to go to Brandy. And if Brandy doesn't have what I'm looking for, maybe I'll go on Facebook and try to find someone else who sells Lularoe. There's literally no reason for me to stick with a specific consultant within the company. And that's a consumer advantage, right? And that helps Lularoe, but that hurts the actual consultant. Now, to your point, Wes, some people make it big. Some people literally quit their jobs and Lularoe is all they do. I think people don't care so much about the unique individuality of, oh, it's such a unique print. Find me one woman who sees another person and they're like, oh, I have that same shirt. I love it so much. Find me one other person who hates that. I think like if Ashley goes out and she sees somebody else wearing a shirt that she has at home or is currently wearing, I think she's flattered that another human being found it interesting enough to purchase it. So I think the whole individual, that's just my opinion, but I'm getting off track here. So, but in any case, what I'm trying to get at though is not all MLMs are bad. Lularoe is bad. Just my opinion. Lularoe's bad, but not all MLMs are bad. Ashley does Mary Kay. She's very successful with it, and we're soon going to have one less car payment.
Wait, is she getting a Cadillac? I forgot about that.
Everyone's familiar with the success of Mary Kay. So, and I think that's the other cool thing is like there's so many people who've got to that highest success of a level of having a pink Cadillac that people are familiar with that hallmark of an achieving point in their career with Mary Kay. So, and I think Mary Kay is a really good example of an MLM that isn't a pyramid scheme. It's going to sound like one. It's going to look like one. But here's the thing. Ashley's quote unquote production is based off of what she and her entire team does. These are completely bullshit numbers, but let's just say that she has to sell $5,000 a month worth of product. It's a lot easier to sell that $5,000 when you have 5 people on your team also trying to help you hit that same number. And then if they hit 5,000 on their own, now they have a car. Again, these are bullshit numbers. It's just an example. But that's the thing is that she isn't directly succeeding off the backs of other people. Their products still cost the same. They're still profiting. And if they do as well as Ashley does, they get the same incentives. And so I think that's really cool. And I wish more MLMs worked like that. And it wasn't just hey, get all these people to sign up and just enjoy the fruits of all their labor. Like, no, like you can keep going and do what you want to do. Make as much money as you physically can or possibly can with the time that you're given. I think that's a really, really enticing opportunity. When we come back, how to get out of an MLM. Sometimes the best way to measure your risk with a company is by measuring how difficult they make it to get out. We're going to talk about that. Stick around. Welcome back, everyone, to the Life Midwest podcast, the only podcast where I continue to struggle with one-liners, but that doesn't mean my energy with those one-liners is going to die anytime soon. I'm Kevin Palmer, and that's Wes Shirley, and together we are not the Wonder Twins, but we are the Life Midwest podcast. If you're looking for ways to support us, we do have a Patreon that's live. Shout out to Derpidoo at the $5 level, dating back to March. Appreciate you, buddy. Buying us tacos, which is exactly where we're headed after this episode. You can also email us at support@thelifemidwest.com, and we are also on all major social platforms at The Life Midwest. I don't actually know if that's a true statement. I have a feeling that one of these days we're going to get like a social platform that just creeps on us out of nowhere, and I just have no idea what I'm talking about. And some Zoomie's going to come and be like, you said that you're on all major platforms, but you're actually not on X Space, or you know what? That sounds like a porn site. I'm gonna dive the fuck away from this.
I hope we're back. If there's an X Space and it is a porn site, I hope the fuck we're on there.
And what kind of content do you want to produce on X Space, buddy?
No, we're just uploading our podcast to it.
Oh, okay, all right. I didn't know if I was gonna be going for like the which was a quiet evening in the den. You know,
ASMR porn. Let's do it.
Exactly. I have seen that started to take off a little bit, so maybe that's where we're headed someday. I don't know. I think that's a conversation we need to have with our women about. All right, that's a get out. Hey, before we head out today, I did want to mention we do have an email from Derpidoo, actually. It's his first email, believe it or not, but we do have an email from Derpidoo. And he brought up some really great points in response to our episode 2 weeks ago about the labor shortage. We're going to dive more into that. Actually, reading through it, it really inspired us. And we're going to do an episode next week where we talk about the situation from a different perspective and we address a different party within the context of within the situation. So, oh my God, Wes, I just realized we're finally back to previewing episodes the week before instead of just being like, well, what are we talking about this week? We talked earlier about the skepticism of MLMs and how it's hard to trust them, right? Especially when they are trying to get you to sign up to do something or sell something of theirs. I think one of the best things that you can do, if somebody approaches you about an MLM, I think one of the best things you can do is ask questions about how do I get out? That sounds like an ass backwards question, right? Because you don't go to a job interview and say, hey, if I want to quit. But if you're like, hey, if I want to quit, like you don't do that, right? And so it might sound odd, but that's actually one of the best ways I think you can measure the risk of getting invested. There's horror stories out there, and I don't want to keep bashing on Lularoe, but there are horror stories out there, and I will link the video if I can find it. This poor girl signed up to be a Lularoe consultant and is now so far in debt to the point where she claimed bankruptcy. I don't want to get the story wrong, but she has like a well-paying job. She has like a good paying job, and she's still doing GrubHub or one of those types of services at night to make extra money to pay off her debts. So I think it's really important to think about, like, if you are thinking about entering into one of these, everyone's going to show you the good side because they want you to do it. So make sure you ask those questions. Because I'll give you some examples. I'll give you Lularoe and Mary Kay. Lularoe will buy back the product if you want to. You are stuck with all of your other investments, though. I wish I had researched a couple of more MLMs other than just my experiences of Mary Kay and Lularoe. But Mary Kay will buy back at 90% of wholesale, meaning 90% of what you actually paid for the product, and you send it back. The only stipulation is that you cannot sell for them again. So odds are, if you go with this plan, you're probably not planning on it anyways, but just for what it's worth, that's their exit plan. They do still give you a way out. And there's other things to consider too, like obviously, like there's micro investments that you make too with Mary Kay, but I think you can repurpose a lot of those things, right? Printers, labels, scanners, packing supplies, shelves, right? Like, you have a bunch of shit lying around. You could probably put on a shelf, right, Wes?
Yeah, I love shelves. I'll buy a shelf for any purpose.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it was previously storing Mary Kay.
Fuck yeah. Shout out to shelves. That's gonna be my first shout out today. Is shout out to shelves. But in conclusion, guys, just be careful and ask questions. A company that is successful, whether you are or not, is something to carefully consider before diving into. And it's not for everyone. If you don't have a business background, or if you don't feel like you're business oriented, the idea of running your own business or having your own business isn't, like, even if I understand that's lucrative and that's great, that's not enough to get your feet off the ground though. So talk with family and friends who have done it. Get their experiences. Don't go to the people who just have a Twitter hot take, okay? But yeah, just talk to people who've had that kind of experience with it. So again, I wanna circle back to the shout outs, and I wanna shout the fuck out of shelves. Shelves are great.
Shelves are pretty fantastic.
Shelves are the reason I'm allowed to have so much shit in my life.
Shelves organize my shit.
Shelves keep my shit off the ground.
Shelves look nice, especially when they're full of shit.
Shelves can hold toilet paper, which wipes shit.
Shelves can hold shit. Literal shit. Jesus Christ, Kevin, what's in your bathroom?
Oh, don't go there.
You have a whole shit shelf?
And that's the shit show, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, I was wondering how far the rabbit hole we were going to go down with this. Hey, folks, we're going to get out of here. We are way over time this week. Thanks for listening, though. If you have questions or you want us to talk more about it, again, shoot us an email at support@thelifemidwest.com or slide into our DMs. Who cares? We won't tell anybody except for all of our listeners. we look forward to talking to you guys next week. We'll be back next week with Derbidu's email and touching more on the labor versus wage issue that we're experiencing right now here in the States and in most parts of the States, I should say. And don't forget to call your mom. Have a good one. And we will see you all next week. Take care. Have a good one.
Deuces.
You're not going to say have a good one?
I would like to integrate deuces. Deuces is a pretty fantastic sign off. Like in any given situation, you're heading out, you flip up the deuces and you say deuces.
All right, folks, deuces.
Have a good one.
Fuck you!